You're listening to Tehachapod with Key Budge, Corey Costello, and Greg Garrett.
Tehachapod time again. Key Budge, Greg Garrett, Corey Costello join me today. Guys, how are you?
Doing good, Key.
Good. I think it's been a while since we've all three been around and done one since I think the last time we talked to John Hammond. So good.
Yeah, that has been a while, man.
I know, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Great, good show.
It's a good thing. We got a lot of
John's
good
show
response.
I listened to it yesterday. It was amazing.
And you know what? Part of that show, we talked about the 1952 earthquake, what kind of plays into what we're talking about today.
Springboarded today's
Perfect
conversation.
segue, Key.
Right? Exactly.
Nice.
So let's go ahead and let's invite in our guests. We've got the warden from CCI, our California Correctional Institute here in Tehachapi, Brian Cates. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And Eric, I'm going to butcher your last name again, Barthelmes.
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 That's why I go by Bart, to make it easy.
Eric Bart, yeah.
Eric, you're the PIO for CCI, and you and I have had a chance to have lots of conversations over the last couple of years, so we finally got this show together.
Finally, after little scheduling conflicts between our two parties, but we're here.
I think you're just keeping the warden, at bay, that way he just... No, Eric does an amazing job. He attends the EDC meetings, the chamber meetings, and Brian, running a city within a city, kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
I was going to say, isn't he like the city manager of the largest gated HOA?
Yeah,
in the city?
maybe, huh?
It kind of feels like that at times.
Yeah.
So what we started to talk about was John Hammond. We talked about the 70-year anniversary of the 1952 earthquake. The 52 quake was pivotal in the direction that CCI went, because originally built back in the 30s, it was a women's prison.
1933, originally built and opened as a women's prison.
So it was open for about 20 years. We had the 52 earthquake. They had to close the doors.
Shut it down.
And then rebuilt.
Yeah, rebuilt in they finished rebuilding in 1954 and opened it up as a men's prison, a version of what we have today. We've added many facilities since then.
So we're coming up on the 70th anniversary of the men's version of the prison. And then overall, gosh, what's that, 90 years that the prison has been a fabric of Tehachapi out at the end of the 202 highway out there in Cummings Valley. So, Brian, I was looking a little bit at your career. You've had several positions at CCI in your career.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to start my career at CCI in Tehachapi. That was my first assignment when I started for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Worked there for about 8 years, doing various jobs around the prison, virtually all the jobs. And what I call traveled around the state, different prisons, doing different jobs, promoting and special projects and such, and then was lucky enough to come back to CCI late 2017 as the chief deputy warden and now the warden at CCI.
I remember you were interim warden for a while, and then the governor actually made it official. When did that happen? A couple years ago?
Actually, the official date was September
of last year.
of 2021.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've been the warden, but not officially until September of last year. So congratulations. You earned your wings. You came up through the ranks. It's a good thing. Homegrown talent, I believe, is the best.
It's been interesting to see the facility change. We talked about the change from a female prison to a male prison, but, especially those of us who are here, the mid-'80s when the expansions were happening at that facility, I mean, that was a sort of a growth spurt for Tehachapi because you were bringing in new staff. It really was a time when a lot of folks were brought into this community to start working there.
Yeah, right around the mid-'80s, they opened up 3 facilities, just one after another. And with that, obviously, it opens up jobs and opportunities for all kinds of areas and for the city of Tehachapi.
Yeah, and used to be able to not so much anymore because we're so diverse in terms of where people work and that sort of thing. But you used to be able to set your watch by the shift change times at CCI. Because especially given our traffic, 202 was pretty much it. And the gas stations and the convenience stores would be busy at certain times in the morning, and then they'd 4 o'clock-ish or so when the shift change went on. And you just knew it was shift change at CCI because now here came all the cars.
But now that's been smoothed.
It does seem to be smoother. When I started CCI, we had 2 distinct shift times.
Yeah.
Right. Now we've consolidated that to one shift time. The city seems very able to handle it. Didn't cause a lot of big problems.
Yeah,
so we did discuss that with you all.
I remember that. Yeah,
we didn't want to have too big an impact.
Yeah.
But it's smooth for me as a resident out there on that West End. That I used to see it, and you'd get either part of the ant trail of cars coming or going, and now can't even tell when the shift change is. So it's been nice as a resident because it's running smoothly.
Well, CCI is a beautiful part of the fabric of Tehachapi. Let's talk about the city within the city, the economic impact. What's going on out there? You're not just a facility full of correctional officers and prisoners, right? You have professionals. You have a lot of money that's coming and going, and administration, doctors, dentists, teachers, all of those sorts of things.
We have, and when you say a city within a city, you are absolutely correct. We have everything we need to be self-sufficient for some period of time, and every position you can imagine to make that happen, with obviously a heavy custody, police presence, if you will, for our incarcerated folks that are there. But we have positions for all manner of trades, from carpentry, plumbing, electrician. We have doctors, nurses, CNAs, LVNs, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. We have loads of clerical staff and analysts and
freshwater operators, wastewater operators. I mean, it goes. This is probably, Tehachapi is probably the only city in Kern that has 2 city managers. You and I.
I think yours is a little larger city, but you may be on.
When people misbehave in this city, you can't just lock them down.
Yeah, I guess.
And I
guess you don't have retail, so I got something up.
They have a commissary for the inmates.
Oh, that's true. We
have a little.
Do you tax them? We need to get tax revenue on that.
Yeah.
Now, your operating budget. We recently were at a meeting at the Economic Development Council, and that number was staggering to me. It was in that $200 million annual.
Yeah, 200 million.
Right around $200 million.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of money that this prison. I mean, you get multiple prisons, but that's a lot of money that you have to manage.
Yes, and that money it represents a lot of staff and inmates, about 3,200 inmates, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,540 staff members to help keep that facility running and bring those rehabilitative programs to the inmate population, and towards the end, as the inmates get out of prison, to the community, right? That's where the rehabilitative properties really come in.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about those rehabilitative programs, because I know, Eric, you and I have talked about some of those. Some of those are give back to the community involvement, and is that to give the prisoners a sense of community or giving back in the way that they can?
So the charitable giving happens through food sales. And just like people on the streets, the inmates that we have incarcerated, they have accounts as well. They have accounting budgets, and at least twice a year, each facility has the opportunity to have a food sale, and we'll link up with a local entity, Red House Barbecue, Conan's, the pizza places, anywhere, and we will provide a menu to the inmate population. They will be able to purchase whatever we set as the max amount, maybe $150 to spend, and they'll spend that money, purchase the food, but then a percentage will get taken of that and go towards a charitable giving around here. And usually the inmate population will decide who they want to give that money to. So we've given to plenty of charities around the area, $25,000 last year alone. We've already done $5,000 earlier in our last charitable giving. So it's just a constant effort, and the inmates do start taking ownership of things that they're doing around here. Stallion Springs is one of them that they've contributed to constantly, and they're helping rebuild their baseball fields out there, their concession stands. So they've taken that opportunity to just rebuild a whole area rather than trickle things to many different ones. They want to take care of one thing and then move on to the next. So we sometimes wonder why we're giving them opportunities to buy food, to buy things and do stuff, but it's also giving back to the community at the same time if we look at that positive aspect.
What about the vote? I remember years ago, I took a tour of a voluntary tour of the inside of the prison, and with some news media, and got to really see a lot of the vocational programs. I think at the time, the big was like upholstery was big, and there was several things. I know some of those have changed, but what are some of the voc ed programs that are out there for these inmates in order to kind of learn a skill, things you have on campus? Just like the warden talked about, we're a city within a city, so whatever you think that a city needs to function, we have a vocation for that. We have auto body classes. We have our own motor pool where these guys are learning how to operate on vehicles, work on vehicles. They're actually obtaining certificates. So when they get out, if they get out, these guys are actually able to take the certification and get an actual auto mechanic's job. So that certification gives them a foot up. And by providing certifications such as auto body, they're able to get jobs that make meaningful money. So when they make the meaningful money, they're not relying on the quick money that got them in there in the first place.
So you're not just Department of Corrections any longer. You're Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, because if you parole somebody and you just put them on the street with no skills, they might end up back in the system. And what you're doing is a positive, right? You're giving them something that they can work towards when they are released. They can go back to their hometown, hopefully, and get a job.
Absolutely.
Right?
The entire goal is to make them productive members of society to the extent that they can be. The department has come a long way from when I first started, reducing that recidivism rate, which is the rate in which they return to prison. And a big piece of that is giving them some constructive and meaningful tools to utilize when they get out and be able to provide for their families and their loved ones.
And then when you're sitting in prison, you want something to do. I can imagine going stir crazy. So it's a positive while you're there, serving time, and then when you get out, then you can become part of society again, really, part of your family unit.
Absolutely. It does serve both purposes. As we all know, boredom's not a great thing. And day after day of that is not good for anyone. So if we intend to have better members of society come out of prison, we have to give them the skills and motivation. And it's not just the skill to do the work, time management skills. You have to get up in the morning, you have responsibilities, those type things that keep them going and give them some coping mechanisms when things go bad. How do I keep going? How do I keep doing that?
So are they required to take these courses? Do they test to see what kind of skills they may have, or do they choose kind of as an elective?
So it depends on the course. Some things they're required to take, certain education courses, your basic education courses. If they don't have a high school diploma, then we require those courses. Some of the vocations and different courses they get to choose which ones they would like to do or they have an interest in. I
want to dive into the education a bit because you brought that up. We have a very robust sort of partnership with Saracoso Community College, and they're out. They basically have their own campus on your campus. So what sort of things is Saracoso out there doing and providing for your inmates?
Oh, Saracoso's been a great partner. They provide education, normally it's evening education for associate's degrees, we have a couple of bachelor's degree graduates, and I believe we have the highest or among the highest graduation rate in the state of California with Saracoso.
CCI does.
CCI does, yeah.
Kudos. Yeah. Good job.
We have the largest face-to-face college in the state.
Yes.
And that makes a huge difference for Saracoso as when they were starting to just build up here in Tehachapi, they were trying to do simple things, just getting highway signage. And they said, well, the rules are you have to have this many students. And for their campus over here on Snyder, they didn't have that. And they said, wait a second, we have inmate students that are face to face. And so they counted that into the student body to help them get some signage and some marketing and things like that. And just to have those courses out there and have, again, to the same as the job skill, the education piece, somebody goes into that high school diploma, but at least they leave with the GED and maybe some job skills. It's a little bit better chance they're not going to come back.
Well, and I've said it's better to have a church on every corner than a bar. And I know council member Joan Pogancord is part of a faith-based organization here in town, and she goes out to the prison regularly and teaches, faith. She has a class that she participates in, and she told me that it's growing. So inmates choose, they can kind of go to church, if you will.
Oh, absolutely.
And yes. I think that's super important, right? Family units, God, all that really matters these days. You need to have your priorities straight.
Yeah, those social connections, be it church, family, both. We encourage volunteers. We have self-help groups and such that we also offer some employment for if anyone's interested in that down the road. We try to keep those lines of communication open with religious services, with the families, visiting, letters, phone calls, whatever we can do to keep their interest
up. Keep the balance.
Up.
You got to keep the balance.
Keep their interest up and their mind off, things that may not be the right choice or the right path to take.
So you mentioned employment opportunities. Let's talk about that. You have a website. If you wanted to become a state employee and work for CDCR, what would be your first step?
First step, go to our website, www.cdcr.ca.gov.careers. And that website is very inclusive. It will have a step-by-step how to apply for the state of California, how to take exams, exam sample tests and such so that you can be familiar with the content on the tests. You begin by filling out your application, take an exam that you may be interested in. Once you pass the examination, then you're typically placed on a hiring list, and you will start to receive letters of interest to the state of California for various places.
Maybe somebody listening is looking for a job.
Well, how
great careers.
From what I understand too, and it used to be very difficult to sort of get a post in Tehachapi because it was such a desirable facility for folks to work at, because the institutions are spread all over the state. and some places where it's extremely hot out in the desert, and then places on the coast which are probably nice, but it's very expensive to live there. So what is the sort of, is that still like that today? Is this a very desirable post for people to come work at?
Tehachapi does appear to be, to remain a desirable place to work within the Department of Corrections. We do have some staff shortages, but not nearly to the extent that other institutions do. So we're lucky to have, many of our employees work and live in the community where they work. So that's great for us and great for Tehachapi. We have folks transferring in pretty regularly. People still like to come to Tehachapi. We get pretty regular requests from new employees that go either to the academy or come from various places around the state. Sometimes I'm surprised at how far people come because they want to move to Tehachapi.
How many institutions are there in the state of California? You know that at the top of your head?
33.
33.
There you go.
Okay,
He could be lying, and we just be like, yeah, it sounds right.
Somebody out there will do a fact check. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Well, you brought up the employment numbers, and actually Eric and I were working on this recently, trying to figure out how many live in this zip code and how many come from without. I think it was about 40% live in this zip code, and then about 60% commute in. But you think about that in terms of the economy. You've got 40% live here, shop here, and then work here, and then you've got the 60% that are coming in, but in the meantime, they're buying fuel. They're sometimes picking up groceries on the way home if they're going back to Lancaster or Bakersfield. So there really is that employment base of 1,500 has a big impact economically because they're living here, or if they're not living here, they're still coming in here and spending money.
Sure, yeah. They're buying their fuel, buying their snacks for work and things that they need, come out for lunch. Some end up, when it snows, staying in the hotels.
That happens
things
too.
like that. We also have we have been working on, it's not official, but what we call our Central Valley, or not Central Valley, but our Central California Training Center, where we hold training classes, statewide training classes, and so we bring people from all over the state into CCI for large scale trainings on one of our facilities out there.
Yeah, using the old level 1 yard that was recently shuttered for inmate population. But what got you with what does that kind of opportunity provide, and what kind of came up? How'd that idea come about to use this closed facility for a training ground?
We wanted to do something with it's the oldest facility there. We wanted to do something with it. Our training staff are phenomenal. They're heavily involved up and down the state with training. And when they threw the idea around and kind of pitched it to some of the statewide trainers, they loved it because it's a real world application. They can come to a place that has pretty temperate weather and utilize actual prison grounds for their training, which they seem to really like. That usually brings in 80 to 125 people into Tehachapi for a week at a time, staying in the hotels, eating at the restaurants, and completing their training at CCI, which the participants seem to like as well.
And you're able to take advantage of that facility while it was still in good, working order for the most part. I mean, because these things have happened. There's been closures across the state here and there, but you let it go, and then all of a sudden, you can't. It's not safe to really necessarily be in. So, kudos to you guys for actually jumping on that right away while the facility was still sort of operational.
Yeah, we really. We love that facility. We want to make the most of it. So we're trying to keep it viable in every way possible.
Nice. And you have a partnership with the hospital, Adventist Health, right? Because you have a couple thousand inmates, stuff happens, right? And so you transport to Adventist in Tehachapi. So not that I want anyone to ever, see harm or get hurt, but we have a full service hospital that is part of your kind of network locally. It's a good thing.
Yes, we use it, the local Adventist Health Hospital, quite extensively especially for emergency situations or things that we want to get looked at in a hurry. We transport them over, and they're great. We get in, we get our stuff done, and get out of there real quick. So,
and there's no interference with the public too. I'm told it's separated, so there's no concerns there for safety. Right? Don't be afraid of that. It is part of the complete picture.
Yeah, and they do a great job there. Like you said, they keep us separated, run us in, get whatever needs are taken care of, and we go back to our institution.
Yeah. Let's roll back to some of the programs that you have, because I part of that meeting that we had attended a few weeks back, you talked about some innovative ways that you're reaching inmates. From the outside world, there's been some entities that have come in and done some creative things, and I was really fascinated by that, having worked in law enforcement and working in secured facilities, and just to see what was being done, I thought was very creative.
We've worked hard to try to change the way prison per se looks and what kind of things we can do in prison. I'll let Bart talk a little bit about some of the programs that we brought in and the people we brought in to help bring things together, bring folks together, and just make prison look a little and feel a little different for at least for a time.
Not like an old Johnny Cash movie, you know. It's
Prison music video.
Yeah, right.
It's just one of those things, like the warden was saying, the population just doesn't know about prison. All they know is what they've seen on Prison Break, what they've seen on lockup, and it's just this big scary entity that nobody knows about. So we've been great about welcoming in these groups, welcoming in these documentaries, welcoming JR, who's a French photographer. He does street mural art, and he pastes these murals of these photos that he takes of people, of objects, of scenes. And so he had this great idea, and he partnered with Scott Budnick, who was one of the, I guess, assistant producers of The Hangover. He's been doing youth advocacy in CDCR for years. And JR and Scott Budnick partnered together, and JR wanted to do a project in a prison, and Scott's like, you know what, I can get you in there. And JR did a project with Governor Newsom one time, and Governor Newsom said, you know what, I'll give you access wherever you want to go. Well, lo and behold, they went on Google Maps, and JR saw CCI, Facility A, Facility B, and said, that's where I want to go. Little did JR know that Facility A, Facility B at CCI are not normal places you want to go visit and not normal places you think you're going to do an art project. So he just saw this big opportunity and saw an obstacle that he didn't think, other people didn't think he can overcome. Scott Budnick himself was just like, I don't know if you can do that there. And JR told me, well, you don't know what art can do. You don't know the power of art. And luckily he started this art project, and I was the lieutenant on the facility when this happened, and previous PIO Elias Garcia, who's now a captain, kind of facilitated this whole program in October 2019. And JR brought his whole team, brought a whole crew to film it and do a documentary about the art with these different inmates, these different groups of inmates, these different ethnic backgrounds of inmates who normally do not operate together. But he got these individuals. We picked about 40 inmates to work together and do an art project, and they all took their photos along with some of us staff, and it was just a project together. And with this project together, these inmates worked together for a week. And throughout this, JR kept connections with the inmates there, and 3/4 of them throughout this program. When we picked inmates that were on this level 4 facility who were doing good things. You know, we didn't want to doom the project from the beginning. We saw inmates that were doing positive things on a difficult yard, and we wanted to reward them to continue their good behavior on a yard that typically doesn't have the greatest behavior. And with that, it was enough incentive for these guys to continue doing what they're doing. We even found one inmate who I myself even said no to the project originally. And the staff on the yard said, you know what, no, he's doing good. He's going to do good. He needs an opportunity. So we allowed it. And today he's one of the inmates who went down to our level 3 facility, our positive or progressive programming facility. And he is now one of the mentors on the yard. And he 100% puts it on this documentary, and JR coming and staff actually noticing his change and noticing the things that he was doing and what he was able to do. And they all think this opportunity from this documentary that has actually turned into a movie, a film, and was shown worldwide last December. And we went to a premiere down in LA, and it was a lot of fun. It's been seen around the world, been seen by millions, and they've actually been back 2 other times to film one of the inmates that was involved in the project paroled last year.
That's a powerful story just now. You know, what I got out of that is we're not just babysitting people. We're actually guarding them. We're actually participating and trying to help them along. Mentor, you said mentor a couple times, but mentoring these men so that when they do get paroled, they know that the world's out there and we're rooting for them.
That's
right? We're rooting for them.
And that's the biggest misconception, is they think we're just there to sit and watch and make sure nothing bad happens. But in essence, we all form relationships. I've known these guys that's been involved in this group since probably 2018. And I could walk on the yard, I'll say hi to them, I greet them. Same thing with staff. They know these guys. Nobody's ever going to see it, but that's part of why we wanted this documentary to come in and see what the actual relationship is within a prison and what we actually do. We're actually mentors. We're actually, we're not just guards sitting and watching, but we're talking to these people. We're coaching them. We're life coaches in a way. And as much as people don't always want to come out and say, hey, just because of the misconception of big, tough guard, it's honestly the greatest accomplishment that we have within our jobs, is making sure these guys go. And when we watch them leave, we tell them, I don't want to see you come back. And we mean it. We don't mean it in a mean way or a bad way. Like, we legitimately do not want to see them come back.
And the JR projects were the I guess it's paper mache technically. He did the photos, probably the most famous one is the aerial he took of the yard, which he imposed that photo on the yard, on the concrete, of inmates and staff kind of looking up. Very cool image. And then he came back with a couple more scenery type stuff on the walls and some staff photos and inmate photos as well, right?
Yeah, so that was the main one. It just kicked it all off with the big aerial footage, and he brought, I don't know how expensive this drone was, but one of the best camera drones in the world, and took that photo and then turned into some landscape photos. We have the mountain scene on one of the on the same facility, where if you looked at it from a certain vantage point, it looked like the wall disappeared and you can just see the mountain range behind it.
Stealth technology.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, these guys are in prison because of a crime. I mean, they committed, in some cases, a very serious crime. But if they are paroled, we want them to live a better life. And that's part of what you're describing.
Even the guys that don't leave, it makes it safer for us overall, too. If we're helping the guys that are staying, that are not going to get out, I'd rather have a safer environment, because we're rehabilitating the guys as well that are staying, not just the ones that are leaving.
Well, it speaks volumes because you mentioned that staff actually said, no, this guy deserves an opportunity. That blew me away, because I've worked in a jail facility and seen that, and that's not a common thing. So that's, like you said, there's these connections. You're around these prisoners for extended periods of time. You start to see their tendencies and say, no, this is an opportunity that he's going to thrive on. And I think you said the power of art, and there was something probably about it being art that connected to him and brought him to a different place mentally.
So he's actually one of the ones on the movie, and he picks it right up, and it's on the film. If you go and watch Paper and Glue, go ahead and look that up. Go on your Fire Stick, Paper and Glue. Go on Instagram, go @JR to go see some of this. But he's one of the ones, JR said it took him years, and he said himself, the art isn't what we're putting up. The art is what we're doing to complete this. He's like, that's the art. That's the relationship. That's where all this is happening. It's not this pasting that we're putting up on a wall or on the ground. We're creating the art. Like, we're the art of the change, and that's his biggest whole mentality with JR is, can art change the world? And it's not going to change the entire world, but it's going to change some things, and it definitely has changed some things at CCI.
Well, it seems like the art, the educational opportunities, the faith opportunities, you're making lemonade out of lemons, right? You are the recipient of Sacramento's rules, the recipient of the voters' will. Different things we're changing. The dynamics of prisons and people being locked up are changing, but you're able to spin it in a way that it's a positive for the employees and for the inmates.
Absolutely. We constantly work towards the goal of having a safer place to live and work for the employees that are there 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day, and the inmates who live there. In addition, our service to the public is safety, and the more rehabilitated inmates that we release, the safer it is for the public.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a part of the overall public safety goals that we all have as government entities, and yours is a part of that rehabilitation, that R that get added. I'm so used to it being CDC, and then several years ago, the R at the end was added, and that was the rehabilitation. That's something that you guys are talking about right here. That's a key ingredient in this entire, with what you're doing. And I'm kind of curious, since JR picked Tehachapi, could have gone anywhere he wanted to, pick Tehachapi. What's the feedback been with the other institutions within the prison system? I bet you guys have heard a little something back, whether it's other wardens or other PIOs that have said, hey, I can't believe that you guys were able to do this, or what's the feedback?
When you go to the warden conference, is there such thing?
There is. We have warden conferences a couple times a year.
Okay.
And I get everything from, that is a really large project to take on for an institution, especially on a level 4 facility. How did you get that done? And largely, I tell them, I gave them access, I made it safe, and I let it happen because it can be done. So you get lots of different questions, but that seems to be the most common. Pretty big project for an institution to bring in, a lot of people and parts and pieces to bring in. How did that work out? And it actually worked out much smoother than one might anticipate.
Because you could easily just say, I'm good, right? And then roll with it. But you took on extra responsibility, extra work, extra return
Sure,
at the end of the day.
and extra attention, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people did a lot of work to move that many non-prison employees in and out and around, and flying drones. Aircraft typically don't fly around prisons. Drones are specifically not allowed in prisons. So we did a lot of things to just to control the environment so that we could do some of the things that aren't normally.
Yeah, because
inside
I wouldn't
prison.
expect prisons. You don't want to be on the front page, right? You want to just be over here doing your thing, and as long as you don't make the front page, you're doing your job well.
That is a pretty common thought. Yes.
But then you took on extra responsibility. You went on a limb and said, you know what? Let's do something that's going to benefit.
Because you didn't have to do it.
Well, I think that's the new thing about CCI is we want to be on the front page.
Just like and the training
wanna be
too,
out there.
right? You want to bring people that are employed by CDCR to Tehachapi to train them, to encourage them to be safer and know more about their job and kind of expand their horizons, if you will.
Absolutely. We want CCI to be an important prison to the city, to the state, to everyone involved.
That's what we're doing in the city of Tehachapi. We try very hard to be the best city in Kern County.
So why not have the best prison?
Why not?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, way to put it. It really, too, it seems like with some of the changes in how the operations are statewide, there was a lot of integration in the past with whether it was inmates in the community doing work projects, what it would be. I know that stuff's kind of changed at the state level. So I think now there maybe is a little less engagement with the public than they had with the inmates in the past. I mean, heck, until probably 15 years ago, the exit for Tehachapi said correctional institution on it. The word Tehachapi wasn't even on the 202 sign. It just said correctional institution. That was it. So there's been there was a little more integration in the past. But so now it seems like you guys kind of have to do that, sort of put yourselves out a little bit to let people know, hey, we're still doing a lot of stuff. We might not be in the community picking up trash or doing weed control like we used to, but we're still out. We're still here doing good work.
Sure, we want to let folks know that we're still here. We're still part of the community. We've been in Tehachapi for almost 100 years. We want to be good partners and helpful to the community of Tehachapi.
I think this is one of those professions in terms of just whether it be a CEO or whether it be somebody working in the facility, another role. For Tehachapi, it's one of those professions where there's no way you don't know somebody who either works the facility or knows somebody who has a family member that works the facility. I mean, it's one of those really, everybody's got a connection to this facility because of somebody they know who works there.
Well, yeah, look at the population of the city and then look how many we employ here. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked about a lot of different things, and I think we'd love to have you come back on. Hopefully when we're all done here, this will be a good experience, and we'll be able to have a part two and maybe talk about new projects that are coming. Before we wrap things up, I want to ask you, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think would be important to share to the community to give them a better understanding of CCI?
With taking on some of these opportunities that we don't think other people would, it has opened up a lot of doors, and we got a lot of stuff going on, and we're excited, and hopefully it keeps coming.
I think, since you talked about the state, the approval process, since we know that most likely there's folks going to be listening to this, take this opportunity to say that Warden Cates and Lieutenant here are doing a phenomenal job, right. And you should invest in this facility heavily because they're doing great work.
Yeah, when Governor Newsom listens, and I know he will.
That's right.
I know he will.
Let's make sure we fund whatever they need at CCI.
At the end of the day, Tehachapi has a beautiful economic situation. We talk about aerospace a lot. We talk about agriculture a lot, mining a lot, but we don't always say CCI. And at the end of the day, $200 million into the Tehachapi economy, that's top five, right? That's a big deal. So thank you for doing a good job. Thank you for participating today, and thank you for keeping, your employees safe, the inmates safe, and being part of, a great economic engine that we have here in the greater Tehachapi area.
Thank you so much for having us on.
For sure.
Yeah, it was a blast. We'll be back.
Yeah, let's do it again.
All right. See, we'll hold them to it. We'll be back. So, guys, in closing, anything else that you wanted to touch on? I mean,
it's been good.
I think the numbers, again, that $200 million, that's a part of our local economy, thanks to what goes on behind the walls of CCI as you guys are able to do things and interact with our charities, interact with local businesses where you can. It's a big deal. Any support that we can at least recognize and acknowledge that work, and whether it's the creative rehabilitative programs that you guys are doing to make sure that when people get out of prison that they're more positive and have the ability to interact in our society. I think that's things that we need to acknowledge. All right, folks, if there's anything that you would like us to talk about, or maybe it's questions for Eric or Brian and what goes on at CCI that we didn't touch on, send those to media@TehachapicityHall.com. We're going to invite them to come back here in the future, talk about additional programs that are going on at CCI. So again, media@TehachapicityHall.com for your feedback. We appreciate your time, and we'll catch you again soon.
Tehachapod is a conversation about Tehachapi designed for the people who live here or who would like to know more about this mountaintop community. If you have a question you would like answered, email media@TehachapicityHall.com. We will try to answer it on a future episode of Tehachapod.